Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about everything because it's been too long since we've been gone. But before you do that, I want to tell folks at home what it is we do on this podcast.
On this podcast, man, we talk about, I don't know, I want to say games, but I also want to talk about everything today. So there's a bunch of stuff.
Absolutely. Well, what do we want to start out with? I know that right around the time that we were thinking about last recording before, your computer blew up and other things conspired to keep us from recording. We were going to talk about, we played a game of Emperor, a couple games of Emperor.
Right, and we wanted to talk about some of that stuff. That's a pretty good place to start because I do have about 1,000 thoughts about Emperor.
Yeah, so
as a format.
So just to lay it out, we played Emperor, Commander Emperor, not Standard Emperor. And for those at home that don't know, Emperor is a format where you have two teams of three. The middle player is the titular Emperor, and the secondary players are called Generals. The big thing is that everybody has an alternate rule called Sphere of Influence, which can be used in other formats too. But here it's the Generals have a Sphere of Influence 1, and the Emperors have a Sphere of Influence 2. That means you can affect the players within Sphere of Influence number of seats of you. So the Generals can only affect their Emperor and the opposing General. The Emperors can only affect the opposing Generals. And basically the Emperors are safe until one General is defeated, and that kind of like opens the floodgates. In addition to this, you can only attack the Generals can only attack directly across from whereas the Emperors can't attack until one of their generals have fallen. And also every creature gets an ability called tap, or it's called deploy. It's tap, basically give control of this creature to another one of your allied players. And this can only occur at sorcery speed, I believe is the caveat there. It basically lets you pass creatures off to your allies. We played a couple games of this, and they had some interesting results. One thing we found out very quickly is that a deck that I like to play a lot, which is I call it a cap and sack deck, because of the technicalities of the way the deploy rules work. You can turn temporary steel effects into permanent steel effects like way too easily. And the second game basically was I was playing just kind of like a battle cruiser Emperor, and the opposing Emperor basically just dug through his deck to find like a one-turn KO win condition, which I think highlighted some of the weaknesses with the format, because all the problems that you get with kind of like the Commander format, I think are kind of or magnified in some ways. But the Emperor format, this kind of like the stuff that our favorite secondary podcast, Distraction Makers, talks about, which is like, it is most efficient not to try and beat each opponent individually, but to win immediately on your own. That's another thing to mention. The only thing that matters in a game of Emperor is if the Emperor wins or loses. And so, like, if you've got an alt win con and you're a general, it doesn't matter. You should not have that in your deck. I think that's the big stuff. Buddy, do you have any immediate thoughts you wanted to jump into?
I have about 1,000 thoughts about Emperor. The first one, which is maybe the spiciest one, is that the turn timers are brutal. There was in our game of Emperor, there was a 34-minute turn, which is to say that somebody finished a turn and 34 minutes later, it was their turn again. And I had been thinking about the nature of that for quite a while. And the place that I ended up is actually pretty insane, but we'll talk about it in a second. Basically, I was thinking to myself, I was like, we have to find a way to take turns more efficiently than each person is taking a 5-minute turn, because with 6 people taking a 5-minute turn, that's half an hour.
Yeah.
The obvious answer is some sort of chess clock, right? Is saying, hey, you have a turn timer budget, use it, wisely. It would be the kind of thing where it's like everybody gets like 30 minutes on the clock or something, and like you want to keep your turns quick so that you don't time out. It would be something along the lines of, you have 30 minutes on the clock. If you time out, you lose the game. right? You just lose the game on the spot because you took too much time on sort of your turns and stuff like that. That's a pretty brutal rule. It's pretty brutal for me in particular because I tend to play dirtily decks that take lots of game actions and don't actually kind of like push for wins and stuff like that. And so that's an option, but it is a rough one. I do like it though, even with a 30-minute turn timer. That's a 3-hour game, which for each person playing. It's the thing that I expect to happen is that it just really punishes players who take like the 10-minute turns, basically.
I think the other problem there too is like chess is like a non-interactive turn, right? Like, and so the issue is like, well, like we had a turn in that game where like I played and set off a bunch of your triggers, and I think you spent more time on my turn than I spent on my turn, right? Which, you know, and maybe there's a strategy to that, right? Like, you know,
there absolutely would be, especially for combat, because you could imagine in combat, I declare a bunch of attackers. Now my opponent is sort of incentivized to slow roll and go, how do I want to block this? Because they're ticking down your clock, not theirs. So you would maybe have to do some trading back and forth. I don't even know how that would work. I thought of the turn timer as a pretty bad solution. I think maybe there's a lower tier version of this, which is to say that you just have a clock for it, but you don't have any sort of rules penalty. My first thought was go to rules, right? My first thought was in chess, you have a turn timer, and if you flub the turn timer, you lose the game kind of thing. I think that's probably that there is maybe a version of things where you just say, just keep people aware of the amount of time.
Yeah, it's like a shame timer.
Exactly. And the shame will be enough of a force to sort of drive down the 8-minute turns from individual people. Another option that I thought of was reduced life totals. One of the tough things about the nature of Commander is that 40 life is a lot of life to sort of chew through. And you have additional benefits and sort of advantages, or benefits and disadvantages around the nature of that kind of being the case. I actually think that in a game of true Emperor, where you are playing normal sort of 60 card decks and you have 20 life, I can actually really see that sort of balloon out to kind of a commander-like sort of position, but also give people lots of range for lethal. You just need one good swing kind of thing. Commander just gives people a lot, and and the big thing is you have reduced your vector of attack by a ton, right? In Commander, you are the recipient of 3 opponents at any individual time. You can get attacked by the whole field if you want. But in 1v1, it's just harder to sort of justify that. So I was thinking you could go down to 30 life or 20 life maybe, but I think 30 would probably be correct in order to handle it. I don't know that I like that answer for a number of different reasons, but you know, it is something that you could do. But my final answer is the one I actually like the most, and it's the craziest one, okay? You take 2 turns a turn, which is to say, players who are opposite each other are both taking turns simultaneously because the zones of control don't interact. So theoretically speaking, you can have 2 people on opposite ends. And this is really more about the generals. I think maybe the emperors would have to take individual turns, but on the generals, Sarian could have been taking his turn on my turn and nothing would have happened. It would have been fine. Do you know what I mean? Because we just can't touch each other. We don't really see each other. The only interaction that would be crazy is is putting more pressure on the Emperor to sort of respond to things, because the Emperor is inside of the zone of control of both of them sort of at the same time. But I think it's actually the cleverest way to solve the problem, because you are now reducing the turn timer essentially by half, or by 2/3 if you choose to have Emperors take individualized turns.
I was going to say, I think the way you would do it is have instead of having 6 individual turns like you said, you do generals, then emperor, right? Because like the 2 opposing generals can't take simultaneous turns, right? Like it's the corner generals take a turn, the other corner generals take a turn, and then the emperors each take a turn taking a turn. And then the way you would do it is that you'd have the You incentivize the emperors to share, share more publicly their information with their generals. That way the generals can be like, you have an answer to this, tap you on the shoulder, right? Like while something's resolving. That way they don't necessarily have to, if they miss something because they're paying attention to the other board, then it's fine.
Yeah. I think that's what I would suggest for sort of the next time. The easy answer is probably the least risky answer is probably the shame clock, the shame timer. But the thing about Emperor that I felt myself, I wasn't tracking. This was Frank and Sarian. Frank and Sarian were so far away that I just couldn't track their game. So it wouldn't have made a difference to me if on Sarian's turn I was taking a turn. And I think the same thing is true for sort of them. But once somebody dies, then you would probably go into a normal 5-turn rotation just because of the obvious sort of implications there. I also sort of think, and I don't quite understand this, if one Emperor dies...
Then the game is over.
No, I'm sorry. If one general dies, the other general lane sort of doesn't matter anymore, right?
I mean, it does in the sense that
you can still like Wrath or something like that. Like,
well,
I don't know.
you can because the other general lane matters in the sense that like if you beat getting to the general by like this is the thing that would also affect the corner general solution is that if I get through, say, general, the one general, then their emperor and their other general get a turn, and maybe they can bust through the other general so that like it's 2-on-2 at that point, right? Like at some point, the opposite, like if you don't think that other general lane matters at all, then you might as well say the first general to loses the game, right? Like because they still have to bust through that general to get to the opposing emperor, right? Either the other emperor has to bust through the general that's bust through, or their other general has to bust through the remaining secondary general, the defender general, I guess I'd call it. Like,
I think you're right. Either way, I really loved Emperor. I thought Emperor was a lot of fun. I have been thinking a lot about sort of alternate formats, especially with like weird numbers of people. There was another one that people were telling me about, which is called like the Eternal or something like that is maybe what it's called. It comes from Vampire the Eternal, which is another Richard Garfield game that is built to be played in multiplayer. But the way that game works is you attack to your left. So it's sort of a free-for-all. The whole board sees the whole board, but there is no ability to attack someone who you are not directly adjacent to. So you attack to the left, defend to your right, and sort of the circle goes kind of around like that, which I think is actually pretty interesting. I feel like that's a pretty good way to resolve sort of crummy sort of 7-player games or like 6-player games where the games get really high up there, or the player count gets really high up there without it kind of devolving into sort of madness. Because one of the things that happens, man, because I've done this, I've played I've a 7-person commander game. One of the things that happens is, which is actually kind of interesting part of the game design, Commander is sort of not a free-for-all. It's kind of always a 1v3. There's basically always someone who is the archenemy, and everyone is kind of ganging up on that person at any individual time. It makes me feel like Twitter. Somebody's the main character, and we're all dunking on him. You know what I mean? When that effect gets ballooned up to 5, 6, 7 people, it's brutal. If you have a really strong turn, but all you need to do is untap, and now I have to go through 6 individual players' turns, like, you just get run over by a freight train, basically. And what happens is 2 or 3 people lose pretty quickly, and then you just kind of get into a normal game of Commander. Because, like, a good player, the arch enemy can typically defend 1v3, but you can't defend 1v6. You know what I mean? So just finding good ways to sort of mitigate that. With, like, Star is a great example of this. Emperor, or this Eternal Wheel sort of format, I think are neat, and I also just think that they're interesting because they allow you to think about deck building in sort of different ways, and kind of come to interesting kind of bespoke conclusions about how games work.
I think the issue there about the deck building side of it is you're never going to build for one of these alternate formats. You're always going to build for 4-player Commander, maybe Star, right? Like maybe you have like a sideboard for like your Star package or whatever. But like the other forms are just too rare. And so I think you kind of have to make the format such that it doesn't give too much. This is I think, my primary problem with Emperor is that it ultimately is going to it's going to really exacerbate these, like, alternate win cons for the Emperor, just because they are so protected. Like, just have a deck that lets you, like, dig for your win con, right? And that's that, right? Like, because, like, in the second game that we played, the opposing Emperor, Josh, just basically assembled his win con, and we had no way to stop him, right? Like the way to stop him would have been to, like, burn through his, like, our generals faster, I guess, but it's not like we were, like, slow about it.
I misplayed pretty hard in that one. So do you remember the game that we played, not that night, but then later on, where I had approached the second sun and I had that card in play that protects me? Opponents can't cast spells during your turn card. I had that in my hand when I went to play Dusk, and it got countered. And not it got countered, Dusk got countered. Dusk is one of the win conditions of Acacia. If I had resolved the Dusk, I would have been able to chain extra turns for the win. And it wouldn't have been chaining extra turns for me. It would have been chaining extra turns for you, which is the crazy part. Basically, what it would have allowed me to do, because I have a card in that deck that shuffles itself in the deck, it's called Nexus of Fate. It says target player takes an extra turn after this one. And then when it goes to the graveyard from anywhere, so after you cast it, it shuffles back into your deck. Basically, the end game of that Acacia deck is just you can chain a gazillion extra turns, or you approach the second side. There's a couple of these different sort of win conditions. But basically, the Dusk would have put a ton of creatures into play. I could have filtered my whole deck down, cast Nexus of Fate on myself infinite times, and then cast it on you infinite times, concede the game, you enter into the spot, and then you just crush kind of thing, right? I think at a position where we could demonstrate an extra turn loop like that, people would probably just concede. But technically, if we were to play the game to its conclusion, that's how it would go. But I do think that that's fundamentally pretty true. I have a complicated feeling about this. I think part of it is that we just played dumb decks. If you are playing a battle cruiser sort of deck, I should not have been playing Acacia. I should have been playing something like Eureka. I should have played a low to the ground, fast deck that is all about kind of pushing damage really quickly and hard as I possibly can. But then I know that I'm going to kind of crash out. Like, the upside is I blow up the enemy general and start pressuring Josh's life total, or I get blown up because that deck has 0 defense. It's all offense, right? And then that lets you come in with the battle cruiser and just run,
the fully assembled battle cruiser, you crash through. Maybe you even concede to open the lane and just, like, I just, like, wave through, right? Like,
exactly.
Get a turn in, is that do a roll of damage on end step, concede, right? Like, so that the lane's open, and just, like, let the battle cruiser, like,
Yeah, the problem was that I was playing an extremely defensive deck. A deck that is all about protecting me and my life total, right? When I needed to be playing... Basically, this is who's the beatdown. We were the beatdown. We had to beat down Josh before Josh assembled his win con, but I was playing an incredibly defensive deck, and I never would have been able to get there. I wasn't really tracking what was happening on the on the Frank Sarian side of the board, but my instinct was... Frank, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sorry. My instinct was that became a bit of a stalemate, and Frank maybe could have been aggressive. I felt like Sarian had a really poor board at the end, and I was kind of like, I feel like
Frank was slowly pushing through. I don't think Frank had enough to, like, crush. I don't think he was maybe, like, being inappropriately aggressive or inappropriately unaggressive. I just think it's just kind of like, they were playing, like, mid-range Final Fantasy decks, right? Or, like, mid-range near precons, and it's like there's only so much you can do in that kind of...
listen, tell me, you were the one who played the, what was it? It was Admiral Brass. That deck was brutal, right? That was a precon.
Sure. No.
But I mean, anyway,
I think just having played with these precons a few times is, like, certain precons, the commander is, like, the entire, like, Admiral Brass is her entire engine, right? Like, she mills a bunch of fucking pirates into your graveyard, and then you put them on the field for free, right? You don't need any other card. Like, you just need that 4 mil to, like, put a couple pirates in your graveyard, and it's off to the fucking races, right? Like, Cloud needs to pull equipment out onto the field in order for it to, like, work, right? And so, you can get a little bit. It can be a little bit dicier with those types of decks. That's why I think like the best precons are the ones that kind of like work on their own, right? Like this Grand Larceny deck.
Interesting. This
Grand Larceny deck that I just sleeved up. The commander's effect is like you get something if you cast spells from somewhere besides your hand, I think is the text on it. It's basically about stealing other people's spells, but it doesn't have its own mechanic for doing it. That's all other cards in the deck. And if you don't draw into the right stuff, then what are you going to do, right? It's not its own engine, right? Like,
you know what's funny about that is I agree with you, but I actually kind of resent that being the case. To be fair, I'm about to pirate somebody else's opinion. I just like watched a YouTube video that like came up in my recommended feed that was talking about kind of like, man, God, I wanna actually shout out the fucking thing because otherwise I'm gonna feel bad. What was this called? I can't even remember who it was. I have a lot of because I like watch a lot of these commander sort of things. I have spent just a lot of time seeing people's kind of opinions about it, but somebody made a video that was essentially talking about how like a lot of modern commanders just are their own engine, which is kind of shitty. It's a little too easy to sort of build around. And it sort of talked about like the Halcyon days. I don't even know if it's the Halcyon days, right? Here it is. It's the Trinket Mage. Modern Magic cards are too easy to use. And basically the idea for this video is saying so many of the modern sort of Magic cards are just the entire engine all in their own, like all in one. Actually, a really great example of this would be Taval. I have that one precon that I bought, the Taval precon. Taval is the dragon who, when he attacks, he mills, and when he attacks, he pulls a land out of the graveyard, and when something leaves the graveyard, you make a zombie. The whole engine is him. He puts the stuff in the yard, he takes the stuff out of the yard, and he pays off taking the stuff out of the yard. When I compare that to Takasia, which is like my new favorite deck, I love this deck, right? When I compare that to Takasia says creatures you control have vigilance and tap surveil 1, right? She has other text, but that's the whole deck is built around this fucking surveil text. All of the payoff that I have built into that deck is about assembling a pretty complicated engine in order to get it in. You create a bunch of creatures and stuff that benefits off of tapping itself and stuff that benefits off of pulling it into the graveyard, and you filter your whole deck around this kind of stuff. You build a big board of weenies, you play Takasia, they all tap to throw stuff into the yard, and then stuff being in the yard lets you do all these other things. So Takasia is kind of the engine in the sense that she is the person who lets me rip stuff off the top of the library, but you need to have the creatures in play. You need to have the stuff in your deck that can make the library things happen. And you need to have a bunch of extra kind of support pieces in order to make this whole sort of thing happen. Or actually Rachel's Magda deck would be another good example of that. Magda is the one that says, whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure, and then you can sack 5 treasures to find a dragon or an artifact from your deck and put it into play. Magda is an engine, but like you need the dwarves. You need something that can tap your dwarves for you. You need like the dragons or whatever that you go and search out of the deck. And so it's just like I like assembling decks that are built around less all-in-one kinds of commanders, it feels like. But anyway, that's like a topic.
I think the danger with running an all-in-one commander is one, they tend to be more expensive, and two, that makes them immediate targets for removal. Right? Like,
absolutely.
you kill Brass twice. It's just like, I guess I'm gonna play Pirate straight, right? Like, like part of what makes Brass strong too is that like I get a bunch of cheap pirates in the graveyard, right? They come back as 4/4s, right? Like that's what the Brass ability does. But like if I have to play them straight, I'm not going to get tremendous value out of them. So
yeah.
Part of that, I think it's just like playing around. It's like kill your opponent's commander. Whereas I think with something like I found this with some of the other decks we play against is that the commander's a threat, but not enough of an immediate threat that my spot removal is being spent on something else. Right? It's being spent on the guy that doesn't let me play spells during your turn, which buys you enough time to like go find whatever of the second sun, Dawn of the Second
Approach the Second Sun.
Yeah,
I'm actually very glad I put that card. It's funny because I had that card and I had cut it from the deck, but I played one game with Chikasia and I was like, I need to be more aggressive about winning the game because otherwise we just get into this situation. It was actually the Emperor game that convinced me of this, where I'm just dirtling, but I'm not really doing anything. I'm not actually like closing out sort of the game. And I think people, I don't know. I don't know. How do you feel about this? I think people actually react pretty poorly.
Hi, Rachel.
Conditions. Hello, Rachel. People react pretty poorly to win conditions like Approach the Second Sun because it feels like it just kind of happens out of nowhere. You didn't have any sort of way to interact or counter it or any of the rest of that kind of stuff. But I actually quite like those win conditions. I sort of love it when where I'm sitting there and I have my whatever and somebody goes, "Oh, I win the game," and I go, "Oh, you do? Show me." And then they demonstrate and I go, "Okay, cool." And we just like get to the next game, right? So yeah.
So I agree. I think that maybe the right way, like this is another thing about like how much communicate. There's a Salubrious Snail video about this, about like how much communication is appropriate, because there's like I think one school of thought that's like as part of the like we're sitting down to play a game of Magic thing, and we get there in our pod just because we play against each other enough repeat times that we can kind of understand it. Is like if I know that's something you're looking to do, maybe I'm playing more aggressively to kill your, to make sure that I have a way to interact with you when that's about to happen, right? Which I think is a fine enough, like I think it's, and like, sorry, let me rephrase from a beginning point. If you're playing with a random pot, I think that's very justified. That way, like you have some expectations. I think it's fine in our pod because we'll learn it. But there's some people that feel like part of the joy of playing a Commander game is kind of like the discovery and also the surprising plays and whatnot and how that all works out. But there is a part of me that thinks that like in order to properly frame games, if like that's the thing that you are going to do at fast speed, maybe it's like part of table stakes, right? Like as a player, are you obligated to be like, this deck digs, and one of the things I'm going to be digging for is an instant win.
Approach the Second Sun. Yeah. I totally feel that. It's interesting because I don't think of it was unique in the sense that I had basically Approach the Second Sun only wins you the game if you have, for me, it was 15 mana. I needed to have 7 mana to play both of them. I needed 6 creatures in play, and I needed 1 extra mana to draw the card, which was to create I had Shurikai out, if you remember. And so it was just like, I had assembled this incredible sort of contraption. But I do sort of think I see what you're talking about in the sense of, if I'm playing against Ruby is like this. The Ruby deck is just big slammers, okay? The Ruby deck plays huge, gigantic monsters and says go. And it's like up to you to remove them every single turn until I lose. You know what I mean? Like every turn in that deck is going to be some gigantic 7 mana beater. A lot of the time it's going to have haste. A lot of the time it's going to attack really hard, right? Like all that kind of stuff. There is a moment when you're playing a deck like Ruby where your opponent has an opportunity to sort of interact and do stuff, which is to say, I play the big beater. And maybe it's crazy. I play the, whatever. It blows up your most important guy. It's a 6/6 with trample. It has haste. I hit you for 6. And now all of a sudden I'm threatening lethal on the untap, right? That creates a moment of sort of tension and sort of stakes, but it's like very telegraphed, right? If I'm in a similar situation against this specific Takasia play, all I see is Buddy has Takasia, Shurikai, I guess you need to see the draw engine. It was actually Takasia, Shurikai, the thing that the 6 creatures, right? And 15 mana. And then you maybe would have been able to, I don't know, intuit that Approach the Second Sun. I didn't, you're right, I didn't announce it or anything like that. So essentially what happened was I went, oh, it's my turn. None of you can interact with me. I am going to cast this card, tap 6 guys, play 1 mana to draw 2 more cards and play it again and win the game. And like that just comes out of left field. Like there's none of that tension. There's none of that back and forth. It was kind of like everybody's building, and then all of a sudden, in a completely uninteractable way, sort of by design, the game kind of ended, right? So I do sort of think that's fair, and I think that that's a pretty kind of like reasonable sort of approach.
And maybe it's just the way that game played out, right? Like if you had played Approach of the Second Sun and like, you know, had to pass your turn, it's like, we know that, you know, you are going to make it such that the draw on your next turn is Approach of the Second Sun again, right? That gives us all a chance to like maybe do something about it.
Like push for lethal or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. Obviously, I built the deck around avoiding that scenario. Sure. But yeah, it's funny because I don't even think of Approach the Second Sun as very good win condition in that deck. Mostly because I don't think I will end up having the 6 creatures, 15 mana is just like a huge set of circumstances. But it is the kind of thing where, you know, I don't know. I felt like
it makes sense more as like a 2-turn win condition for you, right? Like, so I run Approach the Second Sun in Augustin, and I'm also running it in Stiltskin. And that's not because it's a good win condition for them. It's that the decks play so slow that I want to make sure that like Augustin's like ideal win condition, like ideal win state otherwise is like wait until turn 100 and for people to slow mill themselves out, right? Like, so I don't want that to happen. So having a couple of alternate win conditions in there that kind of like, you know, cut short the game are decent. And so like, you know, I'm not going to dig with Augustin for Approach the Second Sun. I'm going to play it and then like not let people do anything for 7 turns and then play it again, right? Like,
the digging is what makes Approach the Second Sun so interesting, I feel like, in Takesha. I actually think most of the time Takesha wins mostly. I mean, it's funny. I guess I haven't won by combat yet, but I have won with extra turns, so I was able to cycle a bunch of extra turn spells and just kind of close things out. But I like, in my mind, the win condition for Takesha is the kind of recursion on these little fucking weenies that just come and keep attacking, and I have I have a couple of different cards in the deck for that. But I don't know, I guess, you know, Nexus of Fate and whatever the other one was are sort of too powerful for an incredibly defensive deck like that. But Takesha is just like,
what is the card in Takesha that gives you the extra turn? It's like the clock
Nexus
tower.
of Fate.
Nexus of Fate.
Oh wait, so there's Midnight Clock.
Yeah, Midnight
which
Clock.
is a mana rock. I actually really did not like that card in the deck, and I removed it. I think of that as a generically good mana rock because it refills your hand, right? When 3 turn cycles and then boom, you get to draw 7 cards. That sounds great. I also thought to myself that I would probably need some graveyard recursion, which is to say like stuff that I can do to shuffle my graveyard back into my library. But the point of Takesha is to dig. And what I felt like I was doing when I had Midnight Clock out is I was resetting my own progress of digging through the deck, which is bad.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You know. I just had this like flash of insight even, which is another Magic card, that like in the Emperor game where you played the Midnight Clock, you like it like naturally like, you know, resolved itself in 2 turns. I'm thinking, does the Sphere of Influence mean that you should have actually only put?
I actually only did do that. I only saw. But it was 4 turns. It was both Emperors, because I saw both Emperors, and I saw, or I guess it wasn't both Emperors.
You shouldn't see the opposing
it would just
Emperor.
It was the opposing player, my turn, and your turn. So
yeah. I just remember resolving relatively quickly and being like, that's kind of wild.
So there's another thing that you can do with it. You can put counters on it.
You can manually put it on?
I don't know that I did that, to be honest with you, but, you know, maybe I did. And yeah.
Anyway, Do you have any other thoughts about Commander stuff since we've kind of like gone far afield? Do we want to?
I'm really excited to play more. Like I said, I love this Takesha deck.
Yeah,
this Takesha deck I think is perfectly dirtily for me, but it also plays into a number of things. It's probably the deck that makes me feel the smartest. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In terms of like challenging my ability to pilot it, because you can imagine handing this deck to somebody and they're like, what does it do? And she's like, okay, you play a bunch of little creatures and then you play your commander and then they all tap and you get to surveil one. And they go, okay, that decision point of, do I leave this on the top of my library or do I pitch it to the yard? I actually think is an incredibly skill testing sort of like moment. And it feels better to play than like when I play Ruby, that deck sort of sucks and I kind of don't like it, but it's just because it's so straightforward. There's nothing interesting about it. There's not a lot of tricks. There's no place where you get to go, well, wait, what's the winning line here or whatever. It's like none of that. You just slam the big boys until you win or fucking lose, right? And Takesha is a pretty unique deck for just this like skill testing. Every one of those surveils, I'm just like, man, do I want to keep it? Do I want to pitch it? Do I want to keep it? Do I want to pitch it? And the answer is most of the time you want to pitch it, but anyway, yeah.
I would say I feel like a lot of my decks, like I don't design as intricate engines. I just kind of like have a dumb thing I want to do and just like, maximize doing the dumb thing. Like Stilt Skin, which hopefully you'll see at some point, it doesn't really have like a win condition per se, right? Like it's just kind of like it pillow forts and then it hands off these like weird old cards that have like drawbacks that, are from like this earlier of the game where it's like 3 mana for a 3/3. That's too good. Make it so you can't cast other creatures, right? Like just give that to somebody else, right? Like
like Treachery.
Yeah,
that's pretty great. That's a pretty great deck. I have another deck that I think of as actually a U deck. You know what? I will say you inspired me to take a look at this deck seriously because of the Sauron deck. I sort of think I want a mean deck. I want a deck to play when I just want to I don't really want to win. I just want everybody to fucking hate me because I'm mad. You know what I mean? Like that's what Sauron feels like. Playing against Sauron is so brutal because I just don't think that removal on a stick, a whole deck that is built around killing your commander for value over and over and over again, is like a kind of thing that most of us have built decks to account for. Right? Basically, everybody has some level of like, oh, and then I play my commander, and it's really good because it does this thing. You know what I mean? And so I want to build a deck called Kelsian the Plague, who is this assassin who has vigilance and haste, and he's Mardu, so he's white, blue, red. But the thing that he has is he pings. He's tap, deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Or I think it's any target. You can also hit a planeswalker. And whenever a creature dealt damage by Kelsian this turn dies, you get an experience counter. And Kelsian gets a +1/+1 counter for every experience counter. The way to build this deck is to just give him Death Touch so that he tap kills things and then he buffs himself, right? And there's a bunch of different like untap engines that you can get where you are, it's stuff like Intruder Alarm. It's like whenever you deal combat damage to a thing, untap. At the beginning of each player's untap step, untap. It's just like a bunch of that kind of stuff. And it's just machine gunning down everybody's shit on the board. And I just think that deck is going to be stupid and awesome and a lot of fun. And so I'm very excited to build it.
That makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. No, I had not thought about Sauron, which is now Hitotsugu, but as a mean deck, but I see what you mean. Like I built it because I like the cap. Like one of the times I got like back to playing a bunch of Arena was during New Capenna, and I built a kind of cap and sack deck, right? And that's what I remember. I was like, oh, I really like this mechanic. But you're right, it does, and it also like can win in a relatively short period of time because like the awful deck is Augustin because like I said, the deck doesn't like actually win. It just like slows the game down until everybody hates you and someone can draw their like win instantly. Like Josh pulled last against the game we played, Josh pulled the Time Fire or whatever it is called
the World Fire. Yeah.
You pulled World Fire, cast World Fire, like with the penalties that Augustin was, imposing on top of it, and I didn't have a counter spell in hand. It's like, fuck you, I win, right? Like, we're done. Leave me alone, right? So
yeah.
But yeah, I feel that. I get that. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, well, what else? I mean, there's a lot of other stuff. What else? What do you want to talk about next?
Hold on, I gotta ban what's it called?
The CD Birkin.
Yeah. There we go. What other stuff do we advertise that we should definitely hit? You want to talk about Hollow Knight and Silksong?
I am Definitely down to. I have been replaying Hollow Knight. I never beat Hollow Knight originally. I played it for work, and I just played a little bit of it. I maybe played like an hour or 2 hours kind of thing, just to kind of like get a feel for some of the stuff. Do you think of yourself as a Metroidvania like enjoyer? Is one of your genres?
Yeah, okay, absolutely. Like, so I really fell in love with the genre with Symphony of the Night, I think is the name of it. It was like the Game Boy Advance, I think it was a re-release. And it's like you play as Alucard, and occasionally when you kill a monster, you get a soul, and the souls give you like extra power, like give you extra assignable powers. And I think this was like a very kind of like
yeah, I think that was an old PS1 game originally that they must have brought, because I do know Symphony of the Night. That's Castlevania like 3 or something like that.
Well, it's one of the Alucard Castlevania games. Let me make sure that's the right one. But yeah, I very much enjoy Metroidvanias. I love these like kind of small indie ones too. I've played a ton of them.
Yeah, I feel like the only one that I played a lot of Metroid. I liked Metroid Prime 2 quite a lot back in the day. But I don't think of myself as much of a Metroidvania player, but I have beaten Grime, obviously a game I published. You know, my name is in the credits, and I don't really remember when it wasn't even on launch or anything like that. I couldn't beat it on launch, but just later on I went and I played through the whole game again just because I wanted to sort of put it kind of like behind me. And like that was a pretty good time. And now I'm playing Hollow Knight again, and I'm just like, man, what's going on here? What's the point of this genre? Why do people like Metroidvanias?
Oh, you know what it was? I think it was Area of Sorrow is the one that I'm thinking of.
Okay.
But yeah. So why don't you like it? Like it's.
I got to the point in Hollow Knight after I have beaten 2 bosses. So there's that first area. I think it's just a tutorial area basically.
The False Knight.
Yes, yeah. So I killed that guy. I got my shoot power, and now I like don't know where to go. And I feel like this is the part that everybody loves about Metroidvanias, but I'm just like I don't care. Just like
you look at the map and you see the parts that like, you know, have like blank areas on it, or that you remember where things were, and then you go and you explore.
Yeah, it's funny to me that Grime worked for me, but this didn't. Maybe it was because I played Grime after playing Elden Ring. Because I also didn't really super like Souls-like stuff like that, but I got deeper into Elden Ring than I had in any other kind of like Souls-like RPG. And maybe I was really tapping into the Souls-like side of sort of like Grime when I played it again, because that must have been like 2023. That was around Elden Ring time. Part of it also, I think, is that I can't customize. I also don't think of myself as a platformer enjoyer, so there's like a lot of little platforming stuff that makes me feel like a fucking moron in Hollow Knight, where it's like the ground is acid, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna lose 50 fucking hearts to missing the tiny platforms and hitting the acid, right?
Yeah. So I think part of it too is that the beginnings of all of these games are like kind of plotting until you get the dash power, which is like,
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
which is like, I can say this very specifically because I played through I rebeat Hollow Knight. I put on Silksong, and it was excruciating to play until I got the dash power, because I just come off of like the fully powered up knight, right? Who has like double jumps and dashes and all this maneuverability and all this ability that makes like kind of like the backtracking not so painful, right? Like, you know, there's like amount of skill that is involved in like, you know, doing dash or whatever, and just kind of like avoiding a lot of the conflicts that you have to fight through when you don't have as much mobility. And when you start off any of these games, and when you start off Silksong, where the character plays relatively similarly, where the character controller is relatively similar, not being able to do any of that and just having to like, you know, plod along at the walk speed until you get the dash power. I guess miles forward for Silksong, you get a dash power. It just felt bad, but like in a way that's kind of like, oh, okay, this is how the beginning of all these games work, right? When you're familiarizing yourself with the mechanics. I just had the frustration of having come off essentially 20 hours of a very similar game that, like, you know, like that had, you know, acculturated me to being able to use all these movement options that I couldn't use.
How? So what is your? I mean, how much time have you put into Silksong at this point?
Not a ton. Enough though. Let me see. 8 hours.
Okay, that's actually that's a whole work day of Silksong. Okay.
Yeah. That is a lot of time. I wonder. So the first time I beat Hollow Knight, it took me like 30-ish hours. Just because it, I was doing every nook and cranny, and I feel like I'm still not that deep into Silksong, and maybe I'm wrong about that. But part of that is also it's the first time playing the game, so I don't know where things are generally, and so I don't I'm being I'm a little bit more careful. I am looking at different places, that kind of thing, like looking for secrets. Concerned about doing a more complete run than I was in. Like I skipped an entire optional area in my second playthrough of Hollow Knight. Like I couldn't remember how to get in off the top of my head to the hive area. I was just like, I don't care enough to actually remember how to do this. I didn't finish the Coliseum of Fools this time around just because, I'm doing this. I'm doing this just because I want to replay it before I play Silksong, and I want to get to Silksong. So that kind of thing. But I think there's a lot of little mastery that you can build in these games, right? Like a lot of expert time precision dodging and whatnot, which I guess if you're not into the platforming thing is not going to resonate with you.
The first time where I realized that I needed to sort of parry jump, which is to say jump on something, but you attack down right as you would hit it and bounce yourself kind of up a little bit, I was like, fucking shoot me. I hate this. Because I just don't think of myself as being dexterous enough to pull that kind of thing off. I guess I don't think of myself as a very dexterous player in general, because that is also sort of I feel like all of the games that I like are like these strategy games. There's no fucking dexterity involved in Hearthstone. You know what I mean? Or even something like World of Warcraft, right? Like, I guess there's a little bit of that, but it's mostly about, because everything is on the GCD.
Yeah.
You kind of have a second
MMO, right? Like you can't rely on the, So some of the, if you want to get the true ending in Hollow Knight, there's a pretty brutal jump, precision platforming section that you'll probably hate. There's at least a couple times where you have to do down/bounces off of things, and that is a core mechanic in a couple places in Silksong, right? It's they're these flowers that you have to bounce off of. But that's
the way to do it. How do you feel about the discourse around Silksong? It is wild that the last time that we recorded this podcast, we didn't know shit about Silksong, and now it has been out for however long. That is to me 10 days. That is kind of like a wild set of circumstances.
What do you mean by the discourse?
I have seen that it has been hit with some negative reviews, which I didn't quite expect. VG24 gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I have no idea. Let's see what the Metacritic is. My sense is the Metacritic is going to be insane on Silksong, just because everybody, it's so legendary. Yeah, it's a 92, which makes sense to me. But I was interested. Oh, VGC gave it a 60.
Is this what, the only thing I see negative about it was kind of standard, where reviews where the responses get good scrub, right? Take it as you will. But that people are just kind of that there's a strain of kind of this game is too hard. Because it is much harder than the original Hollow Knight. And my point at that point is then don't play this game, right? Go watch Mossbag videos when he comes out with them if you care about the lore. But I'm pretty consistent in that across Souls likes that the point of the game is a difficulty, and if you don't want that, then play a different game. But that is my initial thought. Do you have deeper thoughts on it?
I kind of think when games get so big that they become kind of impossible to authentically review because you can't separate it from the context. I think there is no world where Silksong gets less than, whatever, like a 90 or whatever on Metacritic, just from the reality of like people. It is the most legendary indie game to come out in a decade, right? And I just kind of feel like when stuff like that happens, it just the game falls by the wayside. The context of the game is what takes over. It reminds me actually quite a lot of something like The Last Jedi, right? Where I don't think that you can really have a conversation about whether The Last Jedi is kind of good or bad anymore. It's just about it is all about what is happening to Star Wars, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like Batman vs Superman is like this. There's been a million of these, right? Where it's actually talking about the thing itself on its own terms without putting all that stuff aside is kind of just impossible at a certain point. And I just feel like there have been a million of these, and they are so omni whatever that you just can't get away from it.
It's interesting because like my fear in the run up was that like Silksong couldn't possibly live up to the expectations, right? Like, and maybe they avoided that by like pushing through the kind of like hype anticipatory kind of cycle into like this secondary kind of like lol, it's never coming out, lol phase. And then when it does come out in a week that like, everybody's expectations are appropriately refreshed such that it's like, oh, this is just like a really good game. But I see what what point you're making, I guess.
It's interesting because when you don't do any marketing like that, I speak from experience, I guess. When you don't do any marketing like that, you run a real risk, which is to say that you let players fill in the gap. They set their own expectations for what the experience is going to be like. Normally, a lot of the job of sort of like marketing or whatever is about that expectation setting. It is about communicating to players in a very straightforward way. Hey, informatively, this is what is coming in the thing. Right. So when you think about something like WoW Midnight, right? They have told you, hey, you're getting a new Demon Hunter spec. You're going to Quel'Thalas, and these are the zones, and there's a new
housing.
Race. Yeah, and player housing, right? They're very clear up front about all of these things because what that does is it sets appropriate expectations. When people play Midnight, they will then go, oh, this was everything that it said on the tin, right? When you do the kind of cryptic marketing, you are essentially kind of inviting players. You're showing players a bowl and saying, fill that bowl with whatever you want. And that bowl is their expectations, right? And it can work like gangbusters because you can do the Christmas present effect, right? You can surprise people. You can give them something that they didn't know that they wanted, right? But also at the same time, you can run into backlash because it gives people the window to gas the thing up in their own head. What is this? What is actually happening here, right? And then when it doesn't meet those expectations, it like the come down from that is pretty brutal. So yeah, I do think that the quick turnaround was pretty important, and I also think that the nature of sort of the genre and like mechanics and stuff like that. What are the new mechanics in Silksong compared to Hollow Knight? Do you feel like it is a significant evolution from one to another? My sense is that it's much more iterative.
Yeah, so Hornet plays differently. But like, so originally Hornet was supposed to be just like an alternate character for like, that was one of the stretch goals in the original Hollow Knight Kickstarter way back when, and it just turned into a second game, right? Team Cherry is like, it's too big, we're going to make a second game instead. And everybody who backed the original game got Silksong for free. So, good on them. But
wow, they have enough money to do whatever they want. So
yeah, it's like a 3 or 4 person team, right? Like that's like basically.
Yeah, exactly.
They what is it? The game is more Hollow Knight at a level. Or it's like, have you ever seen like Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels, like the original Super Mario Brothers 2, the one that came out in Japan before they like did the reskin of?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels kind of like that for Hollow Knight, right? It is a more difficult game that basically is like, did you like Hollow Knight? Here's a harder, more Hollow Knight-y version of it. And there's some other like material differences, right? Like, your secondary powers can like some of them cost a regainable currency. They're like craftable tools. It's like, basically they're your Castlevania sub-weapons. Those are all like craftable tools. Hornet speaks unlike the Knight. Like the Knight was a silent protagonist. Hornet has her own voice and will say things in dialogue. Because some of the draw of Hollow Knight is the lore implications, right? Like, I'm sure people have figured out by now. I haven't, because I'm keeping myself pretty spoiler free. But like, as of the launch of the game, it was unclear whether this was a prequel or a sequel to Hollow Knight. And I've seen a couple of things that like, kind of like indicate in either direction. So it'll be fun to see to see what it is. There's a lot of stuff that's like, the same but with a different skin, right? Like the Stagway, the Stag Beetles is like, it's a thing called the Bell Beast. Similar type of thing. You call it at a station, it takes you to it. That's like the fast travel system. There's like a very similar kind of like set of like, oh, you buy, the mapping system is basically identical. The characters, it's not the same character that sells you the maps, but it's, similar mechanically, or it's identical mechanically. What was the other thing I was going to say? And there's just some like kind of like iterative kind of designs, like you were saying, right? Like instead of having to fight your Death Shade, and it's not like a hard fight, but instead of having to fight your Death Shade, it's wrapped in a silk cocoon. You just have to hit it. But unlike Hollow Knight, the shade doesn't get put in a safe place, right? Like the shade would always kind of appear like before a boss room, and like in a way that like you would be able to retrieve your souls and back out if you didn't want to. That doesn't really happen in this game. But also on the other side, when you break your cocoon, you get a full silk, which is the energy equivalent, right? The soul equivalent. Stuff like that. So it is much more an iterative design, but it's also definitely for people who are looking for Hollow Knight Advanced, if that makes sense. Like you should probably play Hollow Knight first. Not that it would keep you from getting into Silksong, but I think it is like there's a mechanical progression as well as a potential story progression.
Yeah, it's also interesting because there's a level of it. I think the other piece of this is that it has this kind of Souls-like storytelling, which I have complained about in a number of times on this podcast, which I also just think is not for me. It's funny because I liked it. I've liked it in other places. I don't really think of the Grime story as being like amazing or whatever, but it was kind of like gripping enough or whatever. But like Rain World, I obviously love the story of Rain World. I've loved the story of Rain World for a long time, right? But I there's just like a different, I don't know. There's something a little bit. It's really tough to put your finger on it, I guess. I don't know that I could ever really explain why Rain World works for me and why Hollow Knight kind of doesn't. I think maybe it's about that it's an animal, because in Rain World when you're an animal, there's sort of an expectation that things don't make sense in a way. Like my house cat doesn't understand the nature of like D&D. Orion just gets spooked because there are a lot of peoples in the house on Monday night, kind of thing. And maybe like that just like flavors things in a certain way where the kind of unknowable entirety of everything is so huge that it feels appropriate. Whereas in Hollow Knight, where I have a similar sort of feeling.
Well, they're bugs.
They're bugs?
Yeah. They're all
He's
bugs.
a bug? He's like a ghost.
Well, he's okay. This is like deep lore. Like they are all bugs. Like it's a bug kingdom.
Okay,
right? Like
okay. So like, before he was a ghost, he was a bug.
No, he's a being made from. He's void. Spoilers for Hollow Knight. He's void made manifest. Void being like an element, but like one of the plot lines, and it's like told like they're like text like. Signs, like they're like little signs that you can read that basically explain that, and it's not said directly to you, but it's kind of like it's more than Dark Souls, but like less than like Sonic going like, "Whoa, what do you mean?" Right? Like it's like the implication is like the kind of strong, mostly direct text is that the king in what's it called? In the Hollow Knight setting. Sorry?
How isn't it Hallow Nest?
Hallow Nest, yeah. The king in Hallow Nest, by virtue of being a super special bug, grants sentience to all the other bugs in the kingdom. And if you leave the kingdom, you lose sentience. You're just like a normal bug on the outside. And that's like part of what's happened, like part of the storyline. And a similar thing, how that relates to Farloom, which is the setting of Silksong, I'm not entirely sure, because obviously they've got the same kind of thing going on. I'm going to
be honest with you. When I saw Hornet show up in Hollow Knight for just like 10 seconds, there's like one little platform. You like walk into a room and she's on like the far platform that you can't reach, and she goes, and then leaves or whatever. I was like, what? Silksong! You know what I mean? Because like I never played through it on the first sort of time. I don't know. It's funny to me because I've been playing Hollow Knight and kind of not enjoying it. I've been playing Borderlands and I guess also kind of not enjoying it. And then I've been playing Hearthstone, which I kind of guiltily enjoy, and then Factorio, which has just been delectable. Okay. Recently.
You just did,
I feel like that paints a pretty good spectrum.
You just did like the Emperor's New Groove, like just right face right there. So, I felt like you're enjoying it.
It's just, I was talking to a friend of the cast, Lou, the other day, where I was just kind of like, I'm in this period. Basically, what I want to be doing is Mythic Plus, right? I wish I could be running keys, but our key group is not all that stable at the moment because of computer issues, and that's fair enough. And so I just kind of find myself with like time on my hands. I'm obviously enjoying all of the in-persons, like Commander or whatever. I'm painting, or not painting, I'm actually assembling mostly these Warhammer minis while watching Andor, which is like a great time or whatever. But just like on the video game level, I just felt like I was sort of having a hard time kind of connecting with anything. Hearthstone is easy to play, and Hearthstone gives me incredibly satisfying moments. People really hate this meta, but I think this meta is great. There are a number of times where I have made truly game-winning plays because I saw a really clever line that you just feel like a genius. You know what I mean? When Hearthstone feels like any fucking idiot could put together a deck because they build really kind of parasitic design, which is, it sounds bad, but this is like a design term, right? For stuff that feeds off of itself, right? You get a whole package. It's like 6 or 7 cards. The cards all interact with each other in a positive way, and you put that in the deck and then kind of win. That is fine, but I think it sucks, right? Like that's, when Hearthstone is like that, I'm not interested in Hearthstone. When Hearthstone has the opportunity for kind of pulling together a couple of different sort of complicated things and then really dialing into the meta itself, where you're playing around, you're playing around your opponent's big turns, you're saving stuff, you're using it at the right opportunity, right? The best example of this is when you're playing Control Warrior and you save a brawl, and I know that this guy is going to have a gigantic turn on turn 9. He's going to do X, and he's going to drop a 7/7, and then he's going to drop an 8/8, and that 8/8 is going to cast 20 mana worth of fire spells at my face, and I have to be able to survive that turn, right? Like, that's the stuff that I find like engaging about sort of like Hearthstone, but I wouldn't say that I like actually am deeply enjoying sort of the game. And then I've also been playing Battlegrounds, which is mostly just, that one's even worse. That one is like, I feel like I'm playing solo queue in League of Legends. But then Rachel and I loaded up Factorio on, maybe it was a week ago. Yeah, it was literally last Sunday. On just like a whim. I was like, hey, do you just want to play this? Because Factorio came out with that like new DLC or whatever. And it is just so good. It just completely solves everything wrong in my life, just like logging into a game like that, which just feels great.
So, one of my coworkers is big into those types of games, and he was telling me that like he has a new kid, and so he's like he's playing like 100 times slower science progression. Like you need 100 times the science to like get as far as, because he's like one of these sick people that's like already played through it a couple of times. He's like has the baby in one arm and is playing like 100 times science in the other window, right? Like it's like how he like spends his free time.
That's impressive. Yeah, the reason that we started playing is actually because we played a game that I had wanted to play for a long time, called the Rift Breaker. Do you know Rift Breaker? The Rift Breaker?
No.
The Rift Breaker is kind of like, what if Factorio was kind of like Diablo and a little bit of a roguelike all at the same time? Basically, the idea is that instead of spending 600 hours on one gigafactory that has just this endless systematized kind of progression to it, what if you played for an hour and a half and it's sort of wave based, and it's almost like a tower defense in a sense, because you're like building up your base and stuff like that, but like boss monsters are spawning and they're doing stuff like Diablo kind of mechanics, and you have a bunch of guys or whatever, and you have this hour and a half time limit, and the stuff that you get is all going to reset, because once you are building your base such that you open the rift and then you can teleport out kind of thing. And we played that, and it was actually great. I had a lot of fun. It was really hectic. It was just, it was super brutal and really kind of skill testing in that way of just like, I have no idea what any of these buttons do, kind of thing, right? But it really just made us want to play Factorio, and then we just went hard on Factorio, and that's where we're at. So yeah,
fair enough. What are you not liking about Borderlands?
It feels kind of. I haven't played a lot of it. I played the first hour. A friend of mine, I got to Claptrap, I guess. So I just like played essentially kind of like the tutorial. A friend of mine worked on it. He passed me a key. And I think I just want to play with people, to be honest with you. I think what I want to do for a game like that is you want to sit down with your buds in a 4-player kind of like co-op kind of thing where you get to like level together and you create kind of a team dynamic where, I'll be the tank kind of thing, all of that kind of stuff. I was just kind of doing it on my own on like Thursday night because I was like, why not, kind of thing. I haven't really gotten into it, but I don't know. This happens a lot.
Are you playing Amon?
Am I playing Amon? Who's Amon?
Forge Knight.
No, I'm playing the stabby guy. Not stabby guy. The Exo Soldier, whatever his name is.
Rafa?
Rafa. Yeah, I'm playing him.
Okay. I was surprised because Amon has one of his builds is 2 giant axes, and he seemed very U-coded.
I'm going to be honest with you, Mango. I saw that you were playing Amon, and I was like, I'm not going to go that.
Okay, fair enough.
Just because, like, when I looked at my friends list, and I saw that, I didn't see Monic playing, but you guys are the only 2 people I know who have Borderlands 4 at the moment. And I don't know, when I loaded it up on Friday night or whatever it was, I chose somebody different. And also, I don't know, I liked him. He's Hispanic. That's cute. I don't know. It's a fun time.
No, sure. No, I'm playing the punch build for Amon.
Oh my god, that's a very you.
And I'm enjoying it. So the part of the thing is that, and I will play with you. I will deal with whatever the issues are. I have heard that like it is like, first of all, the game is buggy at launch, right? Like this is a thing that is known. They've been releasing stability patches over the past few days. But part of it is that apparently if you play co-op, it's supposed to just work that like, if you progress, you'll have the progression across like on the secondary, like on the players that are joining as well. But apparently that's not super consistent. It's clearly a little rough around the edges. I definitely there's like one of these kind of like, you can't do this thing right now type signs. And I moused over. I'm like, why can't I do this yet? And it says, warning label not set. It's just like what it says. And it's just like, oh, okay. That's how that's.
They are up to mixed. On launch, they were mostly negative, which was pretty fucking brutal. But they're up to mixed. I mean, I tend to think with games like this, they sort of even out over time. Yeah.
And I don't think it's bad. I just have this, like, one, it's not super well optimized for PC, and 2, like, it is filling the Destiny-shaped hole in my life because Destiny is apparently really bad right now. So I don't want to go play Destiny. So
I don't know. So yeah, Sari was telling me about Destiny. He was talking about how at this point they have vaulted more content than like is currently, like if you were to have never vaulted the game, right? and I just heard that and I was like, that's brutal. That sucks so bad. I would quit immediately. I don't know why, to be honest with you, because on the opposite end, on like the WoW side of things, there are these dead malls everywhere, right? Of like patch zones that nobody fucking goes to because it's not current content anymore. When was the last time you went to the Siren Isle? When was the last time you went to the Emerald Dream, right? When was the last time you went to Zerolek Caverns? Probably not in a fucking while, right? And WoW was full of these kinds of places, right? So much so that people complain about them like on like WoW YouTube or whatever. And I actually think that they should lean into this more often. One of the things that I think has been a great innovation in patch 11.2 is the delve that takes you back to Azure Vaults, the dungeon from Dragonflight. I think that's great. If it were me, I would design every single delve that way. I would say the delves they're not in the new zones. They're not doing new zone stuff. Delves are in the old world in random spots. One of the delves, Wailing Caverns. One of the delves, the Dead Mines. Do you know what I mean? Like cool, interesting. It doesn't even have to be dungeons, right? You could also do one of the delves is,
original Barons. Completely
original, yeah, exactly. Original Barons, right? That's how I would approach it if I was, whatever, Ian Hazzikostas kind of thing. And people complain about this in like the WoW YouTube space all the time. They talk about this dead mall effect because it really hurts new players to the game, because new players get tutorialization quests that are tutorializing them for content that's years out of date, right? Pulling them to go to the fucking Korthia or something like that, when that's just like not how the game is sort of set up. And I do empathize with that too. I think it's sort of wrong. It's the kind of thing where I think the feedback is wrong, but it is spiritually right. Like, yes, we should make the new player experience better. No, that doesn't mean that, you remove quests to take people to interesting locations in the game, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think Destiny's pretty hurt by the fact that like they seem allergic to making content or like having content available that is functionally useless, right? Like I could be wrong, since it's been a while since I picked up Destiny and played for any serious amount of time. Like I basically jumped in to beat The Last Wish or whatever it was, like the final boss of Destiny, before they did post that content. But before that, I played in spurts a couple different times, and it felt like everything that was available to play could be played at a level that would be useful for you. It seems like they don't want to make, or maybe they're just like not. There's some back end reason for it that they can't have content that is useless, in the world, right? Like they can't have like, they couldn't have like, if they wanted to make Mars or whatever they vaulted, they can't just like leave it there and have it not do anything. Maybe there's a back end reason, maybe for like either like they can't make it useless or they can't, support that much stuff for whatever reasons. Maybe it's a monetization thing where they don't want people like figuring out how to use that to like grind some like, limited resource that they, apparently the monetization is really bad this season too, right? Like, that it's, and it's been bad for a while. I think we've talked about this in some capacity before, but, battle passes, I just like hate battle passes in like a live service game. That's the wrong way to put it. I don't like battle passes in an MMO style game because I get some amount of pride of like getting a appearance from like a raid drop, right? Like that's content that I did. I do not get the same sense of pride from a battle pass where it's just kind of like, oh, I played, 80 hours of this game this month. Therefore I get like the thing that doesn't hold the same kind of like point of pride to me that like, earning it in a specific way does, even if they're kind of functionally identical. I don't know how you feel.
I think I agree with that. I like the Hearthstone Battle Pass, but that's just because, like, old Hearthstone, you were getting gold from quests, but now you're getting gold in the Battle Pass, and you're doing kind of extra stuff in the Battle Pass. And I just like that better. I think it's like a better way to sort of frame the kind of thing. But because Hearthstone is sort of like a PvP game, and it's kind of encouraging you. It does a lot of subtle things that really appeal to me, I think, as a player, right? So, for instance, one of the quests that you get all the time is something like play with Class A, Class B, Class C. You got play 3 games, Mage, Priest, Rogue, right? And it's the kind of thing that gets you to stop just jamming your favorite deck over and over again and kind of mixing it up, which when you're not in Giga Ladder Climb mode, which to be fair, I'm at like Diamond 2 right now. Like I'm going to get Legend by the end of the season, I'm sure. And I've hit Legend basically since I came back to the game every sort of season. Normally when I hit Legend, all I want to do is just jam my best deck because I get really good at the matchups. And like this is where you get into the zone of like, I can see the really crazy lines. Oh, I'm going to copy Nabundo 4 times and then I'm going to put a 2 damage spell on you on it, and I'm going to hit him in the face for 8, and that's going to be my crazy out of the box lethal or something like that, right? But because it's like a PvP game and it encourages you to do this kind of stuff, I actually find that it kind of mixes things up so that I feel better about just like playing it. I'm just kind of like more engaged. I'm doing a thing where I'm going, okay, I'm going to build a janky deck. I'm going to build the best taught druid deck that I can because I need to play 3 games of druid and I don't really care what happens. I'll just eat the losses. I'm sure they'll be bad, but whatever. It's fine. I'm doing it for the battle pass. All that stuff is actually really useful, I feel like. When it's in something like an MMO, like Diablo 4 reminded me of this. Not that I was a huge Diablo player, but I liked playing Diablo 3. I went and I completed a couple of seasons of Diablo 3. Some of the seasonal content being in the battle pass really fucked with me, and it made me not want to play Diablo 4 anymore. Such that I just haven't got back to it. I intended to. I liked Diablo 4 actually. I think it's a pretty good game and it was a lot of fun. But I just, I don't know. The battle pass I just feel like it's pretty icky on that front. And I feel like, if they were to do something similar in like World of Warcraft, I would just like hate myself. So
fair enough.
I guess they have the tendies. The tendies are a little close to a battle pass.
Oh, the trading post?
Yeah, where I spend 4,000, tendies on fucking dwarf stuff because I skipped the previous 3 months and then they put a month of stuff that I love everything and I want to get all of it, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I am impressed that they have kind of resisted making like pay for tendies a thing. Like they've done it kind of like sideways in a couple ways. Like, oh, you get more tendies if you pay for like a longer subscription, or if you like, pre-order midnight, with like the super duper pack, you get more tendies, right? Like,
I'm also I actually think, it's funny. I knew the senior business manager or whatever at WoW for a long time. Because he was a dev that I worked with at Alcupara. And not that he and I ever had this conversation, but I just kind of, my bet is they are sitting on the Golden Goose, which is a paid subscription.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And they don't want to do anything to rock that boat. You know what I mean? If I were them, I would just say, just keep doing it. Just let people pay you monthly to access the servers. And have that be that, right? Like that would be kind of my view of things. Because I think in a world where WoW gets really overbearing, I actually think it's a huge advantage that WoW has. And it is one of the reasons that I also think 14 was so successful, even though 14 is worse about it. The way that other MMOs, like free-to-play MMOs, nickel and dime you, sucks so bad. It just really fucking is like Guild Wars or whatever, like they have a shop and you have to buy keys to open treasure chests, all that kind of stuff. I hate the comparison. We've obviously talked about it on the cast how I don't think loot boxes are gambling and it's wrong to call that gambling addiction and all of the rest of that kind of stuff, and that all of that remains sort of true. But I do think that they are just like not fun or engaging or interesting ways to monetize your game. I think they're mostly just bad. And the fact that WoW has a subscription and has been able to keep its subscription for 20 years is probably the reason that they are sort of stuck in the past when it comes to this stuff and never went to, I don't know, battle passy kind of places.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
We should put a battle pass in D&D, okay? That's what I say. Every time you show up to my D&D game, you get a certain number of experience points, okay, and I hand you a random quest and you have to complete it.
You joke, but like there is a school of thought that I'm not totally opposed to, that like, your character only gets experience when you're there, right? Like, and then you have to deal with the party being at different levels, but it's a way to incentivize people showing up. And obviously that's got its own set of problems, but I
When I first played D&D in high school, we ran out of the book, and in the book, it was not clear how the party gains experience. And so we thought, with the monster manual, it listed out the number of experience. We thought that you got experience for killing the monster in the same way that you did literally with World of Warcraft. I actually think we weren't comparing it to World of Warcraft. We were comparing it to like other RPGs. But basically, if you get the killing blow on the goblin, you get 45 XP. Nobody else in the party gets it. And it created an incredible, just an absolutely incredible dynamic where people were sniping kills. People were attacking other players to stop them from getting killing blows because like we were now all of a sudden in competition with one another. Obviously we were like 13. And so, you know, incredibly poor way to play the game. But it was a huge point of contention in our very first sort of rounds of D&D games.
Yeah, no, that makes
Colin is going nuts.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did you see this?
Collins, what do you see?
Mr. Collins, explain yourself.
Oh. He's just hanging out. He's a good boy. Yeah. Well, there's stuff we want to talk about. We hit the big things that we mentioned in. What does he have?
What was that?
Maybe there's like a bug down here or something that he caught.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess we did hit on some of the big stuff. I don't know. Is something happening in D&D land that we could talk about? Funnily enough, we played a game that we hadn't hit on, the Strixhaven game. So this is Frank's game. In sort of like months. And how do you feel about games that like you haven't touched it in a long time and you like come back to it? Has that ever happened to you for like a D&D game where you just like can't get together for 4 months or something?
I don't think with the same actual game, right? Like we never finished Hell's Rebels, right? But like
that's true.
It felt like there were a couple of times where it got a little bit in between sessions, but that's probably like my other local group. We played today for the first time in like I couldn't be there for most of the summer, and it just so happened that like he was the GM was going to run, or the DM was going to run Castles and Crusades, which is like an old school revival game, and he just like got pissed off that there wasn't enough good integration with Foundry, which is our online VTT of choice, because 2 of our players live in Indiana, and so like they used to be local and they moved out, so we have to do everything online, and so. He was just like, I can't do this anymore. I would be okay with you guys if I ran this other PF2E adventure path. And it was like great when I come back. I'm like, that's perfect. I'm in it, right? So, but it's been like 4 months since I've played with them. But we started a new campaign, so you know, not the end of the world. Yeah,
yeah. I am definitely loving the. We also started a new campaign for Saran, but I'm not running it. Rachel is. So basically, my Wednesday night game, one of the players just, you know, has life stuff, and he's like, I just need to take some time away, right? And we were like, well, we want to kind of still keep playing. So we added somebody else. We picked up another friend of the cast, Chris, who has never played D&D before, and we just kind of like invited him to play D&D. But the interesting thing is that Rachel is running the game in my setting, because she was like, I just really like this setting and I want to do stuff in it, but I'm the one who's GMing. Like it is my turn to be like up to bat kind of thing. And so we're doing that, which I'm pretty excited for. I'm playing a warlock. I'm playing Gondor.
Ooh,
as a level 7, you know, fiend warlock or whatever.
Ooh, are you playing with the 2024 rules?
Yeah. We played God's Commandos, which was Warren's game, which only lasted for 3 or 4 weeks. Because it's the idea is that we're doing kind of like rotating people GM, like little kind of vignettes. We touch in on other games kind of thing. And I played Halder, who the idea of God's Commandos is different. It's actually, Heretic Heroes is a lot like God's Commandos, actually, in the sense that the idea is that you get kind of representatives of different gods who band together like the Super Friends to go deal with something for kind of like the united kind of church, essentially. And I was playing Halder, who is a druid. who is a follower of Ulfrir, the god of winter wolves and battle. Which is a thinly veiled Warhammer reference to Ulrich, the Warhammer fantasy god of winter wolves and battle. But I basically played this druid of the storm. I think it's actually druid of the sea or whatever, but I just kind of reflavored it to be about winter instead of you summon a blizzard instead of summoning a whatever it is, water, basically.
Yeah.
And I had a blast. I really love 5e, the 2024 rules. I think that they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of like neat expression that I've been able to do. One of the things that we were doing in the Strixhaven game that just came back is because I'm playing a fighter and I have different weapon masteries, and you can just change weapons at will. Like anytime you make an attack, you can swap to a different sort of weapon. It creates this kind of like, I swap to my greatsword and I do this, and then I swap to my halberd and I do this kind of thing. And I just think all of that is sweet. That's fun. I like it. So I've been having a good time playing 5e recently.
That's totally part of the reason I ask is that I played a Fiend Warlock for like 8 years in the one game I played
in the Chris game, right?
Yeah, in the Chris game, and it's like Send Me to Hell, like the capstone, like level 15 power, is great because you like there's no save, right? Like in the original rules, right? Like you just like you connect and you send them to hell, and then they're gone for a turn. They come back and they take 10d10 damage. It was I love that so much, and they nerfed it, which I get. But like I did not play a hyper. I think I'm the only warlock in the history of D&D to not take Eldritch Blast. So I played. I was a Pact of the Tome warlock that used a hammer instead of like doing Eldritch Blasty stuff. So I had a ton of fun with it. But it's that was bespoke to the game, I suppose. This is part of the reason I'm asking, because I like playing hybrid fightery magic characters a lot.
This is sort of why I think you prefer Pathfinder to D&D. We were talking about this in that other sort of chat. The more I play of 5e, it really is about like, it reminds me kind of a lot like WoW, in the sense of when you play WoW, you are opting into sort of one of 40 kind of builds, and the builds are talent specs, right? But like you're never going to play Arms Warrior and go like, well, I'm actually going to take a bow and I'm going to use Mortal Strike with a bow. It just doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel like D&D 5e is. Like D&D 5e sort of just doesn't like, it just doesn't let you do that all that much. You opt into an archetype and you just kind of have to play it straight up. And if that's okay, you're going to have a good time. If that's not what you're looking to, it's just probably not going to feel sort of like, it's just not going to sort of feel right. Pathfinder feels to me like a much more kind of all you can eat kind of buffet style, in the sense of just like these mountains of feats that you can take to specialize your character in kind of just weird orthogonal ways. The archetypes being able to do that kind of stuff. I think all of that stuff really helps kind of I am going to build a wacky one note character. It's like building like a wacky one note magic deck or something like that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I totally feel that. I do think Pathfinder does have support to just kind of like play the classic archetypes, right? Like you can just play like, a cleave, generic cleave Pathfinder number 5 or whatever, right? That kind of thing. But I definitely see what you're getting at. That like, there's definitely a lot more optionality in there. And a lot of kind of like things you can bolt on to like make things feel a little bit different in different ways. So yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe one day I'll play Pathfinder and I'll be able to make my own janky character. I don't even know what I would even try for, to be honest with you, but
I mean, you could. There's weirdly not a lot of like the real jank from 1E is all gone. Like you can't do like like the oversized weapons thing, or like you could play like.
Oh, I wanted to do that so bad with Tonrik. I had a whole character statted up for it.
Yeah,
that was it Titan Mauler where you were wielding oversized weapons?
Yeah. I mean, there's a barbarian variant that can kind of do it, but I think you need to be like wielding like two-handed weapons. I think it's like I think it's a Giant Path Barbarian.
Yeah, there was something I multi-class for it or something. It was like it was also Slayer was in there, because one of the things that Slayer let you do is take the 2-weapon fighting feats without the prereqs because my dex was terrible. I was like, I can build this as a strength focused 2-weapon fighter if I take a certain number of levels of Slayer in order to get the 2-weapon fighting feats by ignoring the prerequisites, which is probably the jankiest build that I've ever made in any game.
No, and sorry, but I mean in 2E there is like a way to get like bigger stuff, but like
oh really?
But like I think it's do. Yeah. So the giant instinct works that way, which is like, your instinct is kind of like your subclass, right? Like there's like the dragon one, which lets you do dragony stuff. There's a beast one that lets you turn into an animal, that kind of thing. I think there's like a Blood Rager one too. But the Blood Rager one doesn't work the same way as like the one Blood Ragers did. But I don't need to read all the rules right now. But you can use an oversized weapon. And there's not a rule against it, against using 2 of them. So yeah. Use a weapon built for a large. Yes, you could do it as a barbarian, I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. It's funny that actually came up because when we were talking about the Saran game, the game is it's kind of a cops game. The idea is like hard-boiled detectives or whatever. And Rachel was like, "You should play Tunrik," and I was like, "I don't think I can build Tunrik in D&D and feel good about it." He has a very specific sort of style in my mind, and I just like there's no barbarian subclass in 5e that would satisfy this for me. But for Gondor, it was effortless, right? Because there's a warlock subclass that would suffice, kind of thing. And also just the way warlocks in 5e work actually are pretty close, quite a lot closer, I would say, to how I kind of envisioned Gondor than if I were to like extrapolate out the WoW rules. Anyway, yeah, so that's sort of this principle in motion, right? Of like, does this thing match how the character works?
Yeah, I would say, funnily enough, I don't think there's a great warlock specific parallel for PF2E. Like witches are supposed to kind of be in that vein, and I'm playing a witch right now in the game that I was playing earlier today, and it doesn't quite feel like a warlock in the way that I think it's like in the way they can be like, oh, wave your hands, it's the same kind of thing. It really isn't, right? I guess like to play like a warlocky type character, you probably want to be like a sorcerer, maybe, like at least in a 5e warlock type of deal. Like the familiar thing, like the familiar thing maybe works with the witch, but it's
honestly, the thing that's interesting to me about warlock in 5e is really the scaling. I love the way that they did spellcasting. I think the spellcasting is really neat.
The short spellcasting,
because the power of Eldritch Blast. Well, I don't know, maybe not. I know that people think that Eldritch Blast sucks, and then if you play, I don't know, do you know about any of this? Like people say that if you play Warlock, you're not supposed to take Eldritch Blast.
Oh no, I mean, as evidenced by the earlier conversation where I said I didn't take it, I thought I was being weird for. Like, there's so many powers.
Yeah, my understanding is that, like, if Nick liked 5e or whatever and was playing optimized builds, I think the idea is that if you're going to play a Blaster Warlock, you are just taking Blaster spells. Because, like, your Scorching Ray is always going to have 2 additional rays. Or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And so, you actually you want to avoid spending turns on something like Eldritch Blast because your kind of DPR will always sort of suffer for that reason. Which I think is, that's a fair way to approach the game. I obviously think that's lame and stupid, and I don't play like that.
I know whatever. I always felt like I couldn't rely on getting a short rest, and so like I was very kind of spare with my couple of spells I got per short rest.
Yeah, in my mind, when I built Gondar, and this is what I like about it, when I built Gondar, it's Eldritch Blast is for DPS, and then all of my spell slots are for utility.
That makes sense.
You get a couple of them, right? Like, because you're Pact of the Fae, like I'm Pact of the Fae, whatever it is. I have
Fiend, right?
Fireball and Scorching Ray or whatever, or the Fiend, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
You get all the fire spells. But all of my other spell slots is like Gaseous Form, or you know,
right.
I don't know. There's
sure, but the thing is, you get 2 per short rest, right? Like,
oh yeah, exactly.
and that's like that's the thing that I could never rely on having, you know, like like I had a couple of clutch counterspells, but it was really, or like a couple of clutch banishes, but it was like, am I going to spend this very limited resource in a situation where I don't know if I'm going to be able to recover it in the next, you know, before the next encounter? Am I going to have to run around and try and hit things with my hammer, right? Like that kind of thing. So,
yeah. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of content, like D&D content. It's funny because I think of myself as I like the way that I play D&D. I think I run a good game and I have good principles and kind of all of the rest of it. But I'm really interested in seeing what other people do. And I just kind of stepped into a little bit of like... It's sort of like the Angry GM, but for YouTubers, basically. There's a guy called Mystic Arts, who I don't think is right about a lot of things, but I do think that he makes interesting kind of like points, and he approaches the game kind of in an interesting way. And there are a couple of things that I've pulled from him. Like he has this one thing where he says that D&D is not a game, it's a meta game, which is to say it is when you're playing D&D, you are constantly swapping between game modes in kind of the way that maybe you would in like a lobby game from a long time ago, right? If you think of, you know, I can't even think of a really great example of this where you have a couple of different game modes and they're all wildly different genres. Can you think of anything like that? But like, I think of this as like a thing from the 90s. It's sort of like how you could play Mario Kart, the racing game, or Mario Kart, the battle game with the balloons, right? And those are wildly different game modes.
Oh, so like a StarCraft, like, you know, like a Warcraft 3 tower defense map versus a, you know, like Defense of the Ancients versus like...
Yeah, that's actually probably, or even just like the single player campaign, right? You have the single player campaign. This is the best story. You have you have PvP,
ladder,
right? Exactly. It's about ladder climbing. And then you have Dota, right? Which is a whole other kind of, you know, set of circumstances. And he kind of talks about how, like, when you say roll initiative, what you're telling your players is we are entering the game combat, right? And the whole framework of the game kind of changes. And this is the kind of thing that I feel like is intuitively true. I think most people understand this on that kind of intuitive level. But it's actually a really useful sort of frame of mind to keep in. So, because it allows you to kind of swap between exploration and downtime in that way. One of the things that I developed pretty quickly over the course of Hell's Rebels is this, or I'm sorry, not Hell's Rebels. Seventh Expedition is this feeling, because Seventh Expedition is about the hex crawl, and a lot of our game time was spent crawling through the hexes of the Eastern Forest, right? And I began to sort of realize that game was playing differently than D&D had enabled me to sort of play it. And so I had to create a bunch of custom rules. I implemented research. I implemented, you know, all of this stuff about like travel and or whatever. And I just think that kind of stuff is interesting. But anyway, one of the things that he suggested is that you can only, if you want to play an exploration game like 7th Expedition, you can only long rest in a town. Every other rest has to be a short rest, which I thought is kind of wildly brilliant, to be honest with you. Because one of the things that I feel like I've been feeling in 7th Expeditions, and it's going to get more pronounced as we go forward, is the nature of spell slots and per day kind of activities. When you only kind of have one encounter per day, because like if you do roll into a random encounter on the hex grid, you have that encounter and then you move on. Well, you just burn all of your spell. You just do your craziest, highest level stuff, right? And that's a pretty bad frame for the game. Anyway, I've just been thinking about this kind of stuff sort of in general. And in that world, a warlock would actually be insane, would actually be quite good, right? But a wizard would have to think really hard about the spells they're casting, because you would be going however many days without really getting the kind of rest that you need.
Yeah, I feel like that's maybe a little too
restricting.
Too restricting.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like it's probably a good like first approximation solution, right? Like my immediate gut reaction is like, oh, just like make the encounters such that you expect to be able to blow everything on them, type of deal.
That's actually honestly what I have ended up doing in 7th Expedition. In 7th Expedition, I mean, I do want to have a podcast for it, where we like talk about like the final dungeon and all this other kind of stuff. I actually think that I designed a number of the things in the final dungeon with the that were easier than if they had been sort of a random encounter, just because I kind of knew from a balance perspective that they were going to be walking in with depleted resources, or even like what's happening in Heretic Heroes. I also think that this is sort of true for Heretic Heroes, right? The way that I designed that dungeon was like less draining for sort of your resources. And part of this is that like there are good solutions that don't, you guys figured out that third room really well, the gallery with the, in my notes, I called this the shooting gallery with the guy with the bows or whatever. There's stuff that you can do to avoid kind of combat and really preserve your resources going into kind of like the final fight. And I think of that as like good play. And if you can do that, that's good for you kind of thing. But yeah, I know. And this is, I think, the hardest problem for solving for playing Dungeons and Dragons. How do you make it a proper kind of resource management game, where you're incentivizing players not to just kind of do the Skyrim potion thing of just hoard everything until Timbuktu, but also not to do the kitchen sink thing where they realize that each combat is about 3 or 4 rounds and I have 10 spells, so I'm going to cast all of my high level spells because we are going to rest and I don't have to care about it anymore.
Yeah. No, I'm just bouncing around some stuff in my head, like, because like for wizards you can maybe do like a, your spell component pouch can only be like fully refreshed in town, right? So like you need to like, you've only got like X days worth of rest, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah, my gut is to say you push the resources otherwise, but I guess you're right that like you can't really like stretch the combat out that way. The combat game is built on multi encounter days. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for that. I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of this guy's, kind of stuff.
I wonder if like maybe the answer is like you shouldn't do that many like truly like grid style random encounters. Like just thinking about it, how many times do you think Lewis and Clark had to like fight a bear on the trail? Right? but like seriously, like most wild animals won't interact with you, right? Like if you
well, that's true. This is why because I built it through the tension pool, right? It's if you roll low on you roll the 1 on the tension pool, this can generate a random encounter, but the random encounters were almost always fueled narratively. In that crazy argument with Billy that I guess we won't get into or whatever, I said this thing about how if you are flubbing rolls, you need to build better systems. This is kind of what I meant. I didn't want to build random encounters, but I did want random encounters to happen. And if I just run random encounters out of the book, that sucks. So what I did was I built a whole system that essentially narrativized the random encounters, which included, this is like revealing stuff from behind the scenes, but I guess whatever. They cleared the Eastern Forest. We don't have to care about it. It included stuff where I was tracking the enemies moving as they were moving. The enemies were moving around the forest, and the tension pool would trigger their movement. So some stuff that would happen with the tension pool is you would roll something and it would say, so-and-so's Beastman Warband moves 2 hexes closer to the party, right? Which then gave them the random encounter where they are fighting a named guy, and they ended up fighting a bunch of these guys multiple times, right? They learned who Malagor was, who kind of ended up being the final boss of the thing in the dungeon, because they didn't kill him out in the woods, but they killed Kazarak out in the woods, and they fought Morgur 1,000,000 times out in the woods. And it's just like it was like stuff like that. So every random encounter kind of built on the mythology of what was going on. This was also where the white deer came from. That was a random encounter. That was them, they procced a random encounter. The random encounter that they got was a shaman summons a beastman shaman summons this very specific guy, and this very specific guy gives them crazy visions of this fucking white deer, right? And I think that's how you just build out random encounters to be kind of like, even as they are random, they drive your sort of plot and story forward.
Sure. Yeah, I can imagine a version of things where it's like, oh, the Beastman, war horde or whatever it's called is in this hex. You might hit them like 3 or 4 times in the day, right? Like, they're in the hex, right? Like, that kind of thing, right? Like,
that happened. That actually happened. There was a moment where they rolled, I think they rolled twice on the tension pool, and they kind of got attacked back to back. But there's a rule. One of the rules for the exploration is you don't have to win the combat. You just have to get everybody to the edge of the map. So if everybody runs to the edge of the map, you can then kind of start a chase, and then the chase is kind of a skill challenge, and it's like, can you get away? Can you do the Pokemon kind of thing?
Right.
And there was one time where they got chased down. I think it was by Kazrak. It was by somebody. They got chased down, and they took 3 levels of exhaustion just to keep running from the combat, because they were like, we have to get away from the warband. Which I was like, this is great. They were really anxious about like the whole thing. But I feel like that's kind of, I don't know. That's sort of the point. His thing is that you should make hexes much smaller. He was like, I think what you do is you have hexes. A current D&D hex is 24 miles across. I halved that to 12 in order to make some numbers work in the back end. Basically means you can do 2 hexes a day without too much trouble. But anyway, his thing is what you do is you have 3-mile hexes, and when somebody moves into a hex, they see indicators on all of their other hexes, right? So 3 miles is enough to kind of see to the horizon, so you can see, oh, there is a big tower in the distance, or a mountain, or the forest gives way to a lake, or something like that. You know what I mean? And I think that that's a pretty clever solution, and maybe if I went back in time, I would build 7th Expedition that way, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, that is an interesting idea for like, giving people letting people make intelligent choices. That's always like, the tough thing. It's like, at some level maybe you just have to explore, but it's an interesting thought. I like that, actually. Yeah. Well, we're running a little bit long, which I think is fine since we've been away for so long. But do you have anything else you want to talk about, or should we wrap it up?
The one thing I wanted to ask you about: what happened to Star Wars, man?
Did you watch the Flinkit video?
How did you feel about that Red Letter Media video? We touched on this a little bit, in DMs, but
no, I think it is the parallel he draws to the Acolyte, which he's very explicit. He doesn't like the Acolyte, but he thinks it's going to get the same type of rehabilitation that he views the prequels have gotten, because it is a piece of art driven by an auteur rather than a piece of corporate slop, which I think pretty well describes the sequel trilogy.
Have you watched The Rise of Skywalker since it came out in theaters?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't think I've watched, I just haven't watched a lot of Star Wars stuff, right? Like, the sequel trilogy killed a lot of my Star Wars interest.
Didn't it just, though?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about, there's one line from that video that I've been thinking about so much, which is how hard it is to build the Death Star in the current iteration of canon, but how the plans for it were on Geonosis or whatever. One of the things that happens in Andor, not huge spoilers, but minor spoilers, it's very concerned with the construction of the Empire, right? It is the rebels fighting against the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau. And the Imperial Security Bureau is trying to support people who are doing Death Star stuff, right? Trying to actually kind of build the Death Star. And I have just been, I've been obsessed with this, because there's just something so weird about Andor being in the same sort of universe as Ewoks. I don't know how else to phrase that. It is just, Andor is a very good show, and I love it quite a lot. I think Diego Luna is extremely talented. I think that The writing is... It's hard to explain how clever it is. I don't know that I could really do it without spoiling, because you'd have to really get into kind of like the nitty gritty. They make some decisions and you're just like, so good, like that kind of thing. Anyway, but it is so weird that Ewoks exist and that the second Death Star is just, it's just there. The first one is so hard to make, apparently, and 3 years after the first one gets blown up, there's a half-built second one. Oh, okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Star Wars is weird, man.
Yeah.
I don't really have any more follow-up than that. It's just...
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thought. I need to watch Andor so I can more fully understand this, but...
Yeah, I feel like I need to watch The Acolyte in order to... I feel like The Acolyte is going to be something... I think
you need to watch the Clone Wars.
That's also true. I don't want to watch The Acolyte and then defend it for the rest of my life in the same way like with Zack Snyder movies, but it's also so made for me. I feel like everything I've heard about The Acolyte is that it is like kind of perfect buddy Star Wars, and I just kind of don't want to have to take a contrarian position on it for forever. And I'm just sort of scared that I'm going to watch it and I'm going to be like, oh, this thing is so good. But it's just that it's doing like the really hardcore samurai stuff that I really love about the Jedi in Star Wars. And I'm not going to be able to resist.
I think you should do this thing where you watch stuff in the background with the Clone Wars.
That's a good answer. Yeah.
Especially like the first handful of seasons where like look up the viewing order, because it was originally intended to be a series of, what's the word? What's the word?
Series,
anthology.
right?
It's supposed to be like an anthology.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And so like the order they are in on Disney Plus is not like, it's not a like chronological order for like the first 3 seasons. But like if you watch them, you'd be like, this is clearly taking place like 15 seconds before this other one, right? Like, but it's 3 seasons later, right? Like, so definitely look up the viewing guide, because like once you get to like season 3 or 4, it's just straight on from there. Because there's some things that are great about it. There's some things that are not so great. But the last season is incredible. And it's just like it's so good. It is so good. And then you can watch the Bad Batch.
That is a great answer. The thing I've been watching recently is Futurama, actually, because the new seasons are coming out in.
I have to tell you,
or whatever.
I have to tell you my favorite Futurama story, and it's not even having to do with. So I'm listening to a podcast, and it's got like an automated ad, and it says, what is it? It's like the romance is hotter, the action is more intense. See the new episodes of Futurama on like Hulu. I'm like, what?
What? The new episodes are actually pretty great. They're pretty funny. I've been enjoying them quite a lot. But that was my background show, was rewatching Futurama for the 800 millionth time.
Is the romance hotter in the new episodes of Futurama?
I guess so. I mean, Fry and Leela are pretty explicitly like a couple now, which is. Like it was
the sitcom rules. You have to reset that for whatever reason, right? Like,
yeah, and it's just like they're doing coupley stuff, which is just like a little bit weird. But whatever.
Yeah,
it's good. It's funny. Bender says funny stuff.
John DiMaggio employed.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Like that show is like who's it's Billy West, right? Is that right? It's like the show is like, Billy West as like 72 of the characters and John DiMaggio as Bender, and that's it, right? Like, there's like 2 types of voice actors. One that does like, 37,000 characters, and one that does exactly one character very well and gets cast like 4 times, right? Jake the Dog, Bender, Bending Rodriguez, and probably somebody else I'm forgetting about, but yeah.
Yeah.
I've been feeling an instinct to go watch some Rick and Morty at some point.
I watched most of Rick and Morty, but I couldn't we talked about it on the cast actually, and I rewatched basically all of it, and I like dug into the new season, but I just like, I don't know. I sort of hated it the whole time, to be honest with you. There's stuff that's funny. There are jokes that are like good, but like are just sort of ruined by the fact that it's Rick and Morty, basically. Like there's a whole episode about Jerry fucking his own mom. This is gonna sound so stupid. There's a whole episode, and it's Schrodinger's cat, kind of. It, like, this is sort of the principle. But basically, Rick finds out that someone is fucking with Jerry's fate, because Schrodinger's cat is supposed to say that, like, things are in a quantum state of flux. You are both fucking your mom and not fucking your mom at the same, you know, or a desire to at the same sort of time. But Jerry kept talking about it or whatever. And it's the kind of thing that sounds pretty stupid, but in the moment is kind of funny. But then like the back half of the episode is just sort of lame, and that like kept happening. Where I was like, "Oh, this is hilarious." Rick puts it's like a piece of paper where he says Jerry fucks his mom in a box, and then a blank piece of paper in the other box, and he keeps swapping them, and Jerry keeps guessing the right one because someone is fucking with like the quantum entanglement of it or whatever. And so you like, I'm doing a bad job of that bit is funny for 3 minutes, and then the whole rest of the show is a huge, like, that episode is a huge letdown because it's just like, what are we doing here? And that is mostly how I feel about Rick and Morty. Pretty bad. I had a really tough time getting into these later seasons.
I feel like my desire to go back into like back to shows is like based on what the algorithm is feeding me short clips of. And so for a while it was House, and now I'm getting Community clips, and it's like, I love Community, and I just did a couple of years ago. I did a rewatch of the 6 existing seasons. So because I thought that the movie was going to come out within like, imminently, but I'm satisfied.
That's a good one. That's a good one to go back. I have like melancholy feelings about Community because of like, I don't know, just like the way it ends in a way. I feel like I can't go back to it because I get too attached.
Yeah.
And then it ends and I'm like, oh.
That show ending is like, it is both simultaneously the feeling of like leaving college and knowing that you're never going to have that experience again, and also like a very parasocial relationship with like, these fake people that you didn't actually go to college with, but you kind of feel the same way, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. I feel that way about Parks and Rec too. Those are the two shows that really get me in that sort of feel of like, oh my God, it's over. My friends are gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say, I watched all of 30 Rock, and I really liked that, but I also like didn't feel that at the end, right? Like I didn't feel like,
yeah, it's the same thing. Like with The Office or something like that, which is funny because I think people probably would describe this as happening the most with The Office, right? I don't get that feeling, but there's just like some little magic about Parks and Rec and Community that hit too close to home.
Have you watched any of this Office sequel series, like the Newsroom?
Oh, The Paper?
Yeah.
I want to because mostly because I like Domhnall Gleeson, who's in it, and he's the Michael Scott. I actually don't think it. I think it's set the opposite way. The Office is set with like 10 straight men, a half comedian with Dwight, and then Michael, right, who carries most of the comedy on his shoulders. The Paper seems to be the opposite, which is one straight man against a zany, kooky cast or whatever, which is actually also that's like Arrested Development, which I also really love. So I think I will like it, but I just haven't actually watched it. It's just on it's on Peacock, right? And it's just I don't have Peacocock.
I was never an Office person, so I didn't care enough. Like I watched the trailer.
You were never an Office person?
No. I was never really like, I never watched any of these shows in broadcast, right? Like I watched Community. So I watched the D&D episode of Community, showed it to you. You watched all of it and told me it was really good. And I went back and watched all of it.
Oh, that's true. You did show me yeah, because there was a while where in my common room, which obviously had a TV, I was watching the Community every week as it played on NBC. Which is maybe the last time I like ever did that for a show.
The last time I did the first show was a year or two before that, when I was watching Adventure Time on release in like the common room.
Yeah.
But anyway, you were going to say about watch Community on release, but like You watch
it wasn't even bingeable at that point, or
Yeah.
I guess it kind of was because you would like download the episode on like Mega Video or whatever.
I did watch the Yahoo TV series on release.
Yeah,
Like the fifth. What was
that was the sixth season.
Sixth
Or
season,
fifth?
yeah. That was
yeah
the
one
sixth
of the God,
that in Inner
weird
Space,
show.
which was or not. What was it? Inner Space. It was the what was the name of that? The guy who did the female Ghostbusters is the director. Was the same guy who did this.
Paul
Feig.
Paul Feig, yeah, Paul Feig.
Other Space. That's the name of it.
Other
like,
Space. Okay.
The main character was Karen Stoney, who like reappeared as like, you know, because he's like an Indian American, and he reappears as like the taxi driver with an overemphasized accent in Deadpool when he's like just an American Indian with like no accent, right?
Yeah,
and also like, you know, the girl from the AT&T commercials was like one of the other characters, and then a lot of Vane Trub. There was a bunch of other like secondary people too, but you know, like not quite stars. I was maybe one of four people who watched it, and the other three were like Alexio, Enoch, and Zhao.
Oh, you know what's another one of these shows? It's funny but I watch it all the time, is New Girl. Because New Girl is the quintessential Los Angeles show. That show is all about, like, when, you know, it's the kind of thing that, like, I would show my kid to try and explain what living in your 20s in LA in the 2010s was like. Because it's so one-to-one. You know, like, there are these little things that it gets so right about, like, there's an episode where they find a parking spot, and it's it's like they're all competing to find the good parking spot. It's like it's hard to explain how relatable that is. It's such an LA thing. Rachel and I used to have these incredibly Byzantine sort of agreements about who moved the car and where did you park it and all this other kind of stuff, just because like parking is such a core LA thing of like
figuring out like a lot of big cities, right? Like there's a bit about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know.
There's a Seinfeld bit about that too, right? Like,
I feel like people in New York don't. I mean, maybe. I'm sure that this is true.
Yeah,
It's
probably more true in LA now. Back when it was a bit in Seinfeld, which was like, you know, in the 90s or whatever, right? Where it was, you know.
Yeah, like I think about like it's sort of the LA version of like a Subway story. Like Subway stories are the kinds of things that you can do in Friends because everybody takes the subway.
Sure, yeah.
Get everywhere kind of thing. You can't do that in Los Angeles. There's a whole other one about driving people to the airport. This is insanely Los Angeles, right? Like figuring out these again, super Byzantine rules about driving all of your friends to LAX for Christmas, and it's just like stuff like that, man. I love
the SNL skit, like the Californians, right? Like, you know, the whole joke is just describe how they drove, which I can appreciate from like I get the intention of the joke, but I don't understand the specifics. Whereas I'm sure you watch those bits and like understand it with like more clarity than I do.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, listen, I'm living for your dying now, okay? So now when shows are about people on motorcycles who don't have helmets, I guess I understand.
Hey, I was going to say, weirdly, a bunch of shows have like a single arc. The Sopranos has an arc in New Hampshire, right?
That's true. And the episode is called Live Free or Die.
Yeah, well,
and I also think that's true for Breaking Bad.
Yes, yeah, Granite
He
State.
goes to New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's where the cabin is.
That's where the cabin at the very end of the show is.
Yeah. Those are the two I was going to mention. It's very funny because, you know, motorcycles without helmets, right? Like he's like, the gay lover. It's like you're driving down the Daniel Webster Highway on a motorcycle with the wind in your hair, which has both like the no helmets thing, and also it's like the Daniel Webster Highway is how I get to fucking Costco, right? Like.
And also, it's the fact that Daniel Webster is like the most notable person from New Hampshire.
Franklin Pierce was the president.
Yeah, he was like the worst president. Yep.
That's why our state house capitol has a golden dome, because of Franklin Pierce.
Franklin Pierce, who was in a train crash and watched his son get decapitated by the train crashing
I
in
did not know
Massachusetts. Another painful. I mean, yeah, Franklin Pierce is like one of the terrible presidents in the run up to the Civil War. I think he's the Compromise of 1850 guy, where, disastrous compromise that doesn't solve the slavery problem for like 80, for the 80th time in the previous sort of like 60 years or whatever. There's a Sean Munger video about how bad sort of a president Franklin Pierce was, and it is very entertaining. So
I'm not as read in on the pre-Civil War presidents, like, especially like the weirder ones, like like Millard Fillmore or whatever. I just don't.
Yeah, Rutherford B. Hayes or whatever.
Yeah.
They're all. This is one of the things that Sean Munger talks about. Is one of the weird things about the American Revolution is that all of the leaders are very young. Most revolutions are kind of led by old guys. So you think about like Mao Zedong is pretty old. He's in his 50s when the Chinese Revolution happens. Lenin is in his, I think, also his 50s or whatever. But like Thomas Jefferson is 33 when he writes the Declaration of Independence, right? So what happens in the American Revolution...
What have you done with your life? Have you written the Declaration of Independence?
Yeah, I know. Fucking kill me, okay? I was just listening to a podcast about how J.R.R. Tolkien just, published The Hobbit when he was 45, okay? So I have 10 years, okay, Mango? Fuck, okay. Anyway, but one of the things that made America so stable in the beginning as sort of like a revolutionary kind of country is the fact that it had an incredible founding myth, the American Revolution, and most of the people, basically except for George Washington, were really young. And even though the revolution was 25 years previously, right, you had people tying their kind of lineage back to it as, I was a soldier, which I think ended with Andrew Jackson, because Andrew Jackson lied and joined well, it wasn't the Minutemen because he was in the South, but he joined the revolution when he was 16 in, I think, Louisiana. But then what happens is after Andrew Jackson, nobody really has a tie to the American Revolution anymore. So you just kind of get these like incompetent lawyers, and Franklin Pierce is one of the incompetent lawyers who becomes president in sort of like that era, I guess.
Yeah. And then it's like Lincoln and a bunch of other kind of nothing until I guess like Wilson, right? Like
you don't think Teddy Roosevelt? He's a little bit before Wilson, right?
Yeah.
He's 10 years before Wilson.
I don't know. I feel like
maybe.
What is the list of U.S. presidents?
I feel like you get like the capstones or the touchstones are, George Washington, obviously, Thomas Jefferson,
Grant's important.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Then you get Lincoln. I would probably go like Lincoln, Grant, Teddy Roosevelt.
I would say, yeah, okay. I think it's Teddy, Taft, Wilson, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Woodrow Wilson is like one of the first big drives to like an expanded executive, right? Like where the president really matters a lot, right? Like, and obviously his kind of like, he loses his mind at the end of his presidency, right? And his kind of legacy is carried on by FDR, right? And then like you get like the modern presidency, like FDR forward, I think.
Would you say that everybody in like they are all just a different class of president? Even like I think of like Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, or somebody like, I feel like those guys remind me a lot of obviously not Rutherford B. Hayes in the sense that they directly led to the fucking Civil War or whatever, right? But they are fundamentally pretty inconsequential presidents, right?
So I don't know as much about some of them, but like, Carter famously deregulates the airlines, allows like, creates essentially the craft brewing revolution by deregulating, home distilling, but also like oversees a lot of, I think it's inflation that's bad under him, which leads him to be a one-term president.
Yeah.
Essentially, they're all presidents that are presiding over an expanded federal government that like FDR kind of does, right? Like this is like, what's the New Deal, Great Society type stuff, right? Like that all kind of like that's I think that like I think the New Deal, the FDR, New Deal, World War II, all kind of like transforms fundamentally how the federal government operates, and we're kind of been in that arc since, right? Like we've had some like brief retrenchments.
I would probably
right?
buy that, yeah.
Like Bill Clinton and Reagan being like like Reagan, like, scariest words, like, I'm here from the government, and I'm here to help, or whatever, and then Bill Clinton being like, the era of big government is over. But those were, like, kind of, like, very minor retrenchments in a kind of, like, steadily expanding federal government that I think still continues, right?
Yeah, I mean, this dovetails with stuff we talk about where, like, everybody knows the president, everybody talks about the president, everybody thinks about the president, but nobody knows their local representative,
yeah.
right?
Even though they probably have a lot more influence over exactly what happens in your day-to-day.
Yeah, exactly. I think I find that pretty persuasive. It is interesting because I actually kind of think it's like in sort of like a metagame way, like with whatever League of Legends or something, right? You have, even if the power level is higher, you still have standouts and sort of stinkers because they're measured against each other, not really measured across time. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Which I am weirdly thinking about because Hearthstone is having this kind of moment. People are saying, is this a high-powered meta or a low-powered meta? We did a whole episode on this a couple of weeks ago. It's the same sort of thing. Gerald Ford is a low-power kind of president when compared to Ronald Reagan, right? But, like, if you were to compare him to Herbert Hoover or someone,
Hoover maybe not, but like you know, like Franklin Pierce maybe, right? Like, and like there's also kind of like this dual thing where, like, you know, it's an expanded federal government post FDR, but that's not always taken on by the executive, right? Like, we've got a particularly weak Congress right now and have had for the past like 30 or 40 years, I want to say, and it's been waiting. Whereas, like, before that, like, it's still an expanded federal government, but the Congress assumes more of that power at certain points of time and is less on the shoulders of the executive.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing where, like, Congress is passing stuff through Reagan's veto and, like, forcing a bunch of forcing him to eat essentially a bunch of laws because it was so powerful compared to, you know, what he was able to sort of kind of wrangle. This is like the whole genesis of Iran-Contra, because they passed that law through the veto about not selling whatever. I don't even remember the specifics of it.
I don't remember the specifics of Iran-Contra either, but yes, you know, if but that, you know, it's interesting because, like, you know, Reagan was a fairly strong president, right? Like, but we also had a fairly strong Congress at the time. I'd say that, like, you know, obviously Trump is a fairly strong executive with a particularly feckless Congress. Biden had a particularly strong executive branch. I don't think him as an individual was particularly strong, but, like, the cabinet had like, you know, wielded a fair amount of power, and the Congress was just. Congress is also, like, when Congress is strong in the past 20 years, it's like strong under its leaders, right? Like, Pelosi is a particularly effective speaker.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was thinking. Like, I think the evidence that Biden's Congress is strong is that he was able to pass these huge bills with razor-thin margins. Do you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't in a position that, like, you know, Lyndon Johnson was in, right? In the sense that he was driving legislation through a complicated sort of like Congress that was fundamentally very powerful. There were many more Democrats than there were Republicans, but he was dealing with kind of this insurrection of the Dixiecrats. Biden is wrangling a split down the middle, you know, 50-50 Senate and a razor thin margin in Congress to pass huge legislation in order to, like, make real stuff happen.
Was like the Inflation Reduction Act, was that like one of the, was that like on, did that like get enough carryover, or was it passed under budget rules? Like how did I can't even remember.
I think both were passed under budget rules, because I don't think either of them beat the filibuster 60, but both of them I think were passed on razor thin.
Yeah, budget rules. Which is, you know, we're past 2 hour mark. We're talking about politics, but, like, you know, it's
as the podcast continues to devolve into a history and politics podcast. Okay, you know, maybe for episode 500 we'll do some derps talk about history or something.
No, there's you know, like, you see the memes on you know, Reels and TikTok and YouTube Shorts that are just kind of like, you know, basically like thirst trap videos for, like, Nixon and George W. Bush, and it's just like, what the fuck is happening?
Good times. Okay, yeah, we can leave it there.
Yeah. I suppose there's this great clip that gets used a ton, which is like, you know, Al Gore's a Smart man thinks he invented the internet. But if he's so smart, why does every website begin with W? W? All right. And with that, I would say, if you'd like to email us about anything we talked about in this podcast, you can email us at dripsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@dripsplaygames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/games or youtube.com/games. These go out live. Rate, review us wherever you find podcasts. All the links should be down in the description. Buddy, do you have anything else you're looking to promote?
I have nothing else I'm looking to promote.
Well, in that case, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.